Welcome to episode 75 of The Endless Stream. I'm Aidan, and as usual I am joined by Kevin and Brian. We are three artists, illustrators, filmmakers, and all-round shit talkers, and each week we take some of the endless stream of content brought to you through Netflix, Hulu, Disney, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon. Wherever you get your content, we take a chunk of it, we watch it, and we talk about it. This week we are delighted to be joined by PJ Holden, comic book artist for Judge Dredd, 2000 AD, String Bags, The Lion and the Eagle. He's done a lot of great work over the last 20 years. He is on Twitter at PJ Holden. He is co-host of the Sunnyside podcast, and he joined us this week to talk about John Boormans Excalibur. We also talk about She-Hulk a bit. We talk about just nerd news in general. We talk about his career and his journey through art and tech, which is fascinating. If you like what you hear, please consider subscribing to the podcast, heading over to iTunes, rating, reviewing, all those good things. Tell a friend about the Endless Stream, please. It really helps us grow, really helps us keep doing this. Also, you can head over to Instagram at The Endless Cast, where we put up art to go with every episode and clips of the show as well. That's a great spot to suggest something for us to watch, or, disagree, have a different opinion, tell us what you think about the movies or television we're watching. Suggest something for us to watch is basically what I'm saying there. And you can also go old school and send us an email, theendlesscast@gmail.com. Same thing. Disagree with us, tell us something to watch, get in touch. All of that being said, let's get into this episode.
Lack of beard on my face. I'm really I had this entire podcast down.
Kevin
could lend me some of his eyebrow. It would be
I know that.
just enough.
The swordiness, yeah.
Kev, somebody asked me recently where your eyebrow was real. I won't say who, but they they really did think that you were maybe getting them tinted or something.
My eyebrows.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame them. I have
handsome eyebrows.
I do have the unfortunate, what would you say, 34 years of history to prove I haven't had my eyebrows tinted. There's a record of hairy babies.
Father's head thing? Is it Dad and Milkman? Is it? Did I make you all watch Excalibur? Is that the way it worked? You all went off and watched Excalibur?
Yeah.
Well, I'd seen it before, but I hadn't watched it in a while. I think we might have just...
When you were 10 years old, it was on BBC Two or something late at night, or RTE2 or something.
It was on I think it was called The Last Picture Show with Brian Redden, and I recorded it on VHS, and then I watched it the next day, and I was like, I'm too young to be watching this. I still watched it anyway.
I definitely know I watched. Actually, we should save it for the podcast.
Yeah.
We
should save it. This is podcast gold.
So I guess I should, formally welcome PJ to the Endless Stream. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
I think I first became aware of your work through Twitter and comic conventions in Ireland.
I'm huge on Twitter.
I know that's going to sound odd.
You're one of 7 people I follow, I'd say. So you're big to me, pal.
I know that's going to sound odd, but you're one of the few people I keep Twitter for, because
that makes it all worth it. I mean, I don't get paid for Twitter, but I really put some effort in.
I think 100%, because I'm very interested in creative processes, and some of my favorite stuff on Twitter has been, seeing Brad Bird and Pete Son talk about filmmaking on there, just witnessing a private conversation, or people talking about how they work and seeing people's art processes. And I just love the way you talk about your process focus and how you work with Clip Studio, and your page, how you process or work through pages.
Yeah.
And on top of that, then every so often you say something like, I'm enjoying Jack Reacher or Sherlock Hulk, which
I'd forgotten that.
Myself and Brian had a chuckle about that for a while.
I was kicking myself that I didn't think of that. I mean,
Reacher was good fun. The only problem with shows like that is you imbibe them all in one go, and then all the good jokes are gone within 20 minutes, and you've got nothing left. It was still, if I'd watched it week after week, I'd have had new thoughts and new jokes, but that's the way it goes. No, I mean, I've been blogging. I started online So I'm 52. I'm a very old man. But I worked in IT previously, which is why there's quite a heavy skew towards processes and things, because I worked in IT primarily in IT support. So it's sort of part of my natural makeup to kind of go, let me mansplain this to everyone. If I broadly explain it to everyone, I can't be accused of mansplaining because you can all ignore me. So I do like to kind of get really into things, and then part of it is me trying to figure it out for myself and kind of going, does this make sense or that makes sense? And then part of it is me kind of going, eureka, I know how to make this work, and then kind of explain it to everyone else. That's just sort of the way it's taken me, I've stopped working on IT. Like my day job, the last time I was doing my day job was, I think, 2008. So I've been working on IT till 2008 and then stopped. And it's taken me maybe 10 years for me to be in front of a computer with someone and for them to go, where is this? And for me not to go, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Like, this printer isn't working, and I'm the little goblin in the back of my head going, you can fix this. You can fix this problem. Come on, my precious, let's do it. So it's a terrible habit I think IT people have of kind of trying to solve problems, but it's meant that I take that into the comic work and all that sort of stuff. And I started blogging in the year 2000. Actually was blogging around 1997. My first blog was written on a database that would I'd type in an update and I press a button that would create HTML files that would then have to be uploaded by FTP. My first webcam was a camera I'd bought that I realized if I took a photo every 5 seconds, I could store that photo locally and I could set up a web server on my own computer and people could watch that every 5 seconds. So I was like,
Jesus Christ.
I'm
way ahead of it.
Oh, yeah. So yeah. And this is, you don't even know about the web comic stuff. I kind of, the iPhone comics thing that completely allowed me to leave my day job and just do comics. All of that stuff was all lurking in the background, but I like process. I can't help it. And also, I do find myself thinking of funny things and I think that's quite funny. And being annoyed I can't tell anyone. My wife doesn't care. My kids roll their eyes, so it goes on to Twitter.
It's a form of therapy almost, or
it really is
therapeutic for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
I do genuinely sometimes post things and think I should be getting paid for this. These are quite good.
Fair.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, PJ? Did you have a kind of any formal art background, or were you always more kind of IT and computer side with your education?
No, I've covered this in loads of podcasts, but I like around the age 14, computers and drawing were essentially the same paths to me. They were, either one was as likely as the other. And the only difference is at age 14, people were willing to pay me to work in computers, whereas I couldn't figure out how to make art pay. I couldn't even see the pathway to make art pay. It wasn't even, I certainly wasn't good enough, but I couldn't see how, even if you got good enough, I couldn't see how you would make people, how does that work? How do you get people to pay you money to do that? Whereas in computers, I was literally working at the age of 14. I was being paid to work at the age of 14. Like I was programming at 17, 18. This is going back 1987, 89, sort of early programming. I'm always worried I'm covering things I've said in other podcasts, but I was one of the early whiz kids. Have you ever heard the term a whiz kid? Like 12-year-olds who knew what they're doing with computers would be, there's a whiz kid. Now it's like there's so many kids know what they're doing on computers. You don't even, that's not a free. I know, yeah. But it was then. It was that kind of thing. So. So to me there was absolutely no reason why I couldn't do both of those, or one was just as important as the other. But as I say, working in computers at age 14, I did art O-level, which was a kind of the first, so you do, I think now they're called GCSEs, but at that time they were O-levels, which is your first sort of formal qualification. And I failed my art O-level at age 16 or so. And I got a B in computer. I think it was a B in computers O-level. And so it was like, well, art's so subjective anyway. What is the point in going down an education route with art? And computers paying money. So I did computers for years and years and years, and sort of always drew in the background. Like my pencil, I was notorious for telephone doodles that would take up vast areas of paper. You know, I was like, other people were drawing little grids and things. I was drawing scenes and battles and whatever while I was on the telephone. And you know, you'd occasionally get someone saying, "Oh, you should do that professionally," but it was like, I mean, I saw what professionals were doing. I saw what I was doing. I was going, yeah, no, that sounds like a daydream, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But it was, I think, when I was about turning 30 in the year 2000, which was as a 2000 AD reader, it was like this all felt significant, because I remember reading 2000 AD as a kid thinking, wow, 2000 AD is so futuristic, because like I'll be 30 and that's like, oh, I mean, that's so old, you know. And just as the year 2000 was coming up, I'd left one day job and left a computer job to start a new computer job that was part-time. And I'd taken the job very specifically because it was part-time. I thought, well, I can probably pursue drawing a little bit more than I have been doing, because I'd always kept my hand, and I was always doing, like 95, I think was my first published work, which was for Fantagraphics. And I'd done some small press stuff, but not very much. And then 97, 98, I started doing more small press stuff, at 2080 related small press stuff. And then come the year 2000, it was like, this just felt like a big, just, you know, it's the year 2000 and I'm turning 30 and 2018's, you know, that was a big thing.
Significant,
and it was all building towards the significance. And it was like, and I, you know, I wasn't married yet, but it was like, we're going to get, you know, at some point I'm going to get married, and then that's your future locked in, you know. You know what, you can't have kids and go, I've decided I'm going to entirely change my career. That's not going to happen. So, yeah, but then within, I don't know, like, I think 6 or 7 months, I'd kind of gone. There was a first at that point as well. 2000 AD had just been bought by Rebellion, which so previously it was with a publisher, IPC, I think it was, or Fleetway, who were publishing all sorts of things like My Little Pony and all sorts of stuff. And 2000 AD was just a weird thing they didn't know what to do with. And Rebellion kind of came in and said, "We're a video games company and we want to buy this comic off you," and they bought it. So it was all big change for 2000 AD around the year 2000 as well. And Andy Diggle was new editor, and I had gone over to see Andy at a comic convention, the first, what they called it DreadCon, which was a 2000 AD convention. And I bought him a big pile of stuff. And it's like, I'm not expecting to get any work. I'm going to give you a big pile of stuff. I want you to look at every single page, and you'll see there's a slow, steady progression. You know, I'm not saying I'm good enough. I'm saying, if you look at the state, if you look at the rate of improvement and the general direction of it, you'll see that in maybe 3, 4, 5 years, there'll be a quality I'll hit, hopefully, and that might be good enough. But as it was, Andy had seen, because at that point as well, Andy Diggle, who was editor, who went on then to write various things, including The Losers and stuff. Andy was quite active online on there were, I don't know how many, you guys remember message boards, like the Alt Comics 2000 AD was one of them. There was Alt dot whatever comics kind of stuff, and that was sort of the only social media there was at that point. So, you know, you'd get to know writers and artists and various other people sort of involved in comics, and that's Andy had got to know me through doing stuff there, and actually had seen me. I'd set up a webcam. Again, this is pre-YouTube and pre all this stuff. I'd set up a webcam while I was drawing some stuff, and he'd seen that video of me drawing. Not video, he'd seen it live, and kind of went, and he saw the drawing that I'd done. He went, "Oh, is that the drawing you did?" I went, "Yeah." He says, "That's pretty good. Yeah, you're definitely getting better. I'll give you some work." He didn't look at any of the pages. A big pile of sheets of them like this thick, and he looked at none of them. He just went to the top minute, and part of me was slightly aggrieved. It didn't quite work out the way I'd planned it. It was like he didn't look at all of the pages I bought with me. That seems unfair. I shouldn't have bought those. I know it was the wrong thing to do, but at the same time, he didn't look at any of it. He just glanced at it. And so
failed successfully.
I'd rolled a 6 without even realizing it. And then I had done some small press stuff with Gordon Rennie, who was writing for Dredd at the time as well. And I kind of not texted him. Nobody was texting in those days. I emailed him and said, "Look, hey, Andy said he'd give me some work," and Gordon went, "Oh, I've just finished a Dredd I've sent to him. I'll ask him for you to do it." And so that's how I got my first Dredd. It was like that. It was sort of
amazing.
And then I had a grin on my face for 2 days. It was just really sore.
Were you still working the IT job at that point, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, I stayed in the IT job for another 8 years after that. So I was not leaving that day job. I mean, it paid really well. I had holidays and I got sick pay and I got a pension. I was not leaving that job without being prized away from it, which is what happened.
Fair.
In 2000,
That's the trouble with that sort of job, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know?
It's comfort.
The temptation to stay there is just like, because I mean, I could easily have done just as much work, and I did for 8 years. I did a lot of comic work, while I was doing that stuff, and also, I don't think you realize it at the time, but you kind of think to yourself, "Oh, I'll have so much freedom when all I do is comics," and you realize, "Oh no, I had all the freedom before. I had all the freedom before I was being paid to draw." To do whatever I wanted, and now that I'm being paid to draw, I don't have that much freedom anymore. It's like now I've got to work to get paid.
Yeah, I tattoo for a living, and I'm in Dublin Ink, and quite often I get people messing me about like having Flash, which is what we would call like pre-designed artwork, you know. But like I think like if you asked me like even like say 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I would have had loads of Flash, you know. I don't anymore. It's if I had time to draw Flash, like I have, you know, time to say do something else, in the sense of like I'm so busy with the customers and clients and their demands that like I just don't. And I would love to draw Flash, but like when art becomes your profession, you're like kind of your 9 to 5. Sometimes the personal stuff does.
Hitmen don't kill people for fun anymore. That's
this is it. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's like, you know, it's like I could kill this guy, but that's a job. That's a job.
Yeah.
I mean, or they have the expression, it's the shoemaker's children never have shoes. That's the other. You don't really get to do stuff for yourself, you know. It's but you know, you live and you learn. But like in 2008, I came up with an iPhone comic idea. Like at that point, there was no iPhone comics, and I came up with an iPhone comic idea, which was written by Al Ewing and software. It was basically software to read comics on the iPhone. And as the App Store had just opened, and it essentially Apple kicked it back because it was too violent. It was like, oh, you got to resubmit this without the violence. But it was a futuristic 2000 AD style future sports game called Murder Drone, where the only way to score a goal was to chop somebody's head off and score it with their head. So there was no way to reduce the violence, because it was over the top violence. It was like satirical violence. It was stupid violence. It was like Wile E. Coyote. It's like doing Wile E. Coyote or Bugs Bunny, and somebody saying, "Yeah, we really love that Wile E. Coyote gets his comeuppance. Could you do it without the violence?" You go, well, then it's just horrible, then, isn't it? It's just a sad little story of the thing that doesn't get stuff. It's not nice. So we put out a press release, and it went nuts worldwide because it was First Amendment issues, and the App Store just opened, and Apple had banned a couple of apps. So I remember they banned an app that was basically a picture of a knife that when you shook the phone like you were stabbing someone, it would play the Psycho music. Right?
I remember that.
I was going to say, I feel like I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Apple, it went worldwide, and our app, because it was comics that had been, and so comics are freedom of speech and First Amendment stuff, and when that wasn't really what we were thinking. We were just going, I really think this is a thing that could work. And they banned it, and we ended up NBC Universal. This all happened within like a 3-week period. We worldwide publicity. NBC Universal contacted us. We were chatting to DC and Marvel at the time as well, because there were no other app readers. This is no competition out there at that point. And NBC Universal asked us to adapt our app for reading the Heroes comics that they had, and we kind of went, yeah, okay. And I left my day job that day. I went to work and said, I'm leaving. And they went, oh, you can't do that. I went, I think I can. And they went, are you sure? Like, I've been there 8 years. Are you sure? There was a lot of stuff, because the financial crisis we were on the cusp of it, and things were being weird, and you could tell things were being weird, because I worked for a charity, and I was the IT support guy in the charity, and we were watching the housing market kind of just shoot up and up and up and up. And like for a lot of charities, one of the big income sources they have is people dying, and they leave their houses to the charity. And what would have happened is we old Beryl would have bought our house in 1939 for £5 and 3 squirrels or something. And then she is now, 90 years old or whatever. And she kind of goes, well, I've got £1,000 saved away for my 2 sons. I'll give them that money. I'm a £200 house. I'll just leave it to the charity. By which time the house has accrued, was worth 2 million. Just over time. But a lot of these old people didn't realize that. They just thought their houses were their house that was worth, and the housing market was going nuts. I mean, I literally, because I was looking to buy a house, this 2007, 2008, every day I'd look at the houses, and the houses would shoot up in price, just shoot up and shoot up, and you'd be looking at it going, there's something I don't know, and I'm genuinely thinking, I don't understand this. I can't understand. I can't make head nor tail of it. So I'm stupid, and I know I'm stupid. And I'd go to our head of finance, who was a very, very smart money guy, and I go, John, I don't understand this. And John went, don't understand it either. And I went, there's something wrong. There's something seriously wrong. So at that point, then a bunch of the head department heads in my place left, which kind of left the charity I was working for. We were a bit sort of, it's like everything was falling down from under us, and you were starting to see not money worries, but you were starting to see that things were not right generally, and high income was going to start coming in. And I think it was like, because the bottom fell out of the housing market around that time, and so it was like it looked like my job was in peril, or maybe I just didn't know where I stood, because my boss had gone, and the new guy was a nice guy, but like, he didn't know my role really. And it's funny, when you're the IT guy in a place where you're the only IT guy, nobody knows what you do. You might as well be a warlock. They don't have a clue. You come along, fix a computer, and vanish. And they go, "Ooh, did that? The machines don't work. Call upon the necromancer." And down I come, and it's like, "Well, I've done some mystical incantations, and I've left again, and I've cleared a paper jam." And it's like, we don't understand. So I felt at that point, it's like, something's going to happen to my job if I don't make something happen to my job. That could be my job when I've been fine. I mean, in the end, it might well have been, there was a bit of a bump, and then things were settled down. But at that point, it was like, I don't know where my job's going to be. And so I kind of went in and go, I'm leaving. I'm going tomorrow. So, you can, if you need anything, give me a shout. But I'm going to work for these guys doing the comic stuff. And I thought, I've done it. I've broken away from computers, and now I work in comics. And what I was doing in comics was writing a PHP-based backend for a comic book reader. And I was like, no, this is more computers.
I was going to say, did you feel like comics at all?
This is programming. This is just hardcore programming. And it's like, I mean, I did, there's, I'm going to tell you, this is boring, but it's when, sometimes you do a thing and you're quite proud of it. And in one field, it is very good. It's like winning a medal for something, right? But nobody knows what that, you go, I've won a medal for mibble scribbling, and people go, what the flip is mibble scribbling? You go, you don't understand. In one very specific area, it's amazing, but you don't care about it.
Yeah, fair.
So there's a thing called Cake PHP. Cakes PHP is a boring stuff. But
Brian might know all this stuff. It's up to his
there's a thing called Ruby on Rails. Ruby is a programming language. Rails is a way to develop apps within Ruby on Rails. It allows you to super fast develop apps with all sorts of backends. There's a similar thing for PHP. PHP is a pre-HTML processor language, which is for programming backends of stuff. And it's a clone of Ruby on Rails, but it's called Cake PHP. And I had used Cake PHP, and I ended up developing some big chunks of it. And at one point, somebody asked me to be a project leader of it. I'm like, well, this is not, I've got more into computers somehow, and this is not what I meant to do. So I ended up
mental.
There was a big chunk of cash. It wasn't an awful lot of cash. I think it was about $6,000. And I went, if I take that $6,000, that should do me for 6 months. Yeah. And I've got enough work to do me for 3 months, which means in 3 months, I need to find, within 3 months, I need to find more work from 2000 AD. And that's what I did. I mean, the first year was kind of good. The second year was terrible. Third year was kind of good. It has taken me maybe 8 years to get to the place I was in terms of income that was close to when I had the day job and comics. When I had the day job and comics, I was earning enough to pay all my bills, and I was earning comic money, which was not, can be good, can be bad, but it's extra money. When you don't need it, it's extra money. So it's like, oh, let's go to a convention, let's go to a holiday, let's do that. It was great. And then suddenly you're only earning comic money. It's like, let's go to a convention. No, that costs money. Have you seen how much money it goes? It costs. Oh, I'm not doing that. So doing that was it was the only way I would ever break that temptation to just break it. It couldn't happen twice, but at the same time there was no other way of doing it, so that's how I've ended up just doing comics in a frantic. And when I did that in 2008, it was like, I don't know half my time. I don't know what I'm going to do because I've got enough work, but half the time I don't know what I'm going to do. So I ended up I was selling paintings in a market stall, my own paintings and caricature paintings and stuff. Just a desperate kind of grab for any art job that I could think of, because 2000 AD was still really the only game in town for me. I'd done a little bit of American work, but it wasn't very well paid. I think I'd done a book called Fearless for 2000 for Image Comics at the time, but I didn't earn a penny on that. Like literally no money at all. So
jeez.
So, and it was 4-issue miniseries. So it took a while. It took a while to start earning money, but also having enough companies that I work for that I know that, like, if there's no work from A company, I'll check B company, and if they don't have anything, C company, and ideally you have 3 projects on the go at once, and that makes sure that you're not going to have that fall down, nothing to do. So, but it only you're fast.
But I'd like to ask you, because so I studied animation and illustration in college, and in the summer before my final year, I got a wee comic book gig for some just like kind of basically BSer online through DeviantArt or something, like a Canadian guy. But I was getting paid for these pages and I was doing them, and they looked awful. It is what it is. But I remember like finding it like at that age. I was like 23, say, for example, right? I think I was probably 22. But it's like I remember being so reclusive. So reclusive. I worked all summer. I worked hard like my friends doing their jobs, if they're outdoors or in retail, hospitality, whatever. And I had nothing to show for it. I was getting like, I'd say, God, if I was getting like €10 a page, if it was, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't even that. I thought like, so I'm living at home with my parents, this is going to be enough, like I'll be fine, it's comics, I'm going to make comics, I'm going to get paid for it. But no, it was, and but the biggest struggle was the reclusiveness of it. And then I kind of did a whole flip on it. I went into tattooing, which I think is one of the more social kind of art forms, because you're literally just with the canvas, or I wouldn't say canvas, but that's, in terms of, I mean, like in terms of relating it to art. You're the person you're working on is a person that you chat to.
Not many canvases can talk back to you.
Exactly.
But that's,
but but you know what I mean. But I think, if what you're saying there is, PJ, are you a lone wolf? I am a lone wolf. Well, I love COVID at the end, so in terms of lockdown, it would suit me fine, after so long. But you like the reclusiveness of it. You like the kind of you had an issue with it, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I love being left on my own. I love chatting to people. I love getting out and going to conventions. But I like fundamentally to recharge. I like being on my own. And I mean, the hardest part of lockdown for me was that everyone else was at home. It's like, why are you all here? Yeah, on my own. Yeah, for a little while. And my wife will know. My wife knows that, like. I will absolutely deny this is true. But if she goes, we're going away on holiday, will you be okay on your own? Inside, I'm going.
Yeah.
Damn it, yes.
I don't know, Brian, but that's definitely me as well. One of the best 10-day periods I ever had was when everybody I knew seemed to just go away, and it's like I don't think I spoke for 3 days. I was just drawing at my desk and just like feeding the cats, cup of tea, do a draw, and go for a walk.
I just had a lovely weekend on my own. My girlfriend was in Cambridge, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I watched Excalibur, it was a good weekend.
I honestly think I would definitely be much more comfortable on my own all the time, and be very uncomfortable in a situation like this, but for the fact I worked in IT from the age of 14. Because it was face to face with people, explaining things to people constantly. My first job was working in a computer shop, so I was 14, talking to customers, and you very quickly kind of, all the jaggedy edges of your interactions with people start getting rounded and smooth in a certain shape. And that shape is usually, let me explain things, which is not ideal in every situation, but in a lot of situations it's handy. But it also, I'm quite confident on stage and, in front of people. I'm confident and happy on a panel and stuff. But I think fundamentally at my very core and essence, I like being on my own. I like solitude. I like quiet. Like if I'm on my own working, I will frequently I don't even like background noises, and I everything will be off. It'll just be silent. That's stuff that I kind of miss now. I've got 2 kids, but you sort of get it back. I mean, I definitely like my favorite times at Christmas used to be when my wife and I were dating. I'd go up to see her at Christmas time, but there would be a period between being at my parents' house and being at my house, where my wife and I then lived together. Still do, I mean, obviously. But she would have gone up to her mum's house. And there was this little period on Christmas Day where I would be in my house alone. And it was Christmas and everything was quiet and peaceful. And that was lovely. I like Christmases like that. So yes, it is. I mean, it definitely... I mean, I do think it's naturally a healthy thing to want to be on your own all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it can be very easy to kind of think this is what I want, and then you get it, and then after a while you really are going stir crazy and going, this is not good. And I've kind of seen it with my youngest son, who does like being on his own. He does like sitting and drawing and stuff, but he can get quite sort of overwhelmed emotionally when he's been on his own for too long.
Yeah, I think it's fair to be like, kind of equally introvert as you are extrovert, like to be comfortable on your own is fine. As long as you're also comfortable to be with others and socializing,
Yeah.
But look, people go through different things at different stages of life, it doesn't mean like everybody develops the same.
No.
People catch up.
Will you see this for a segue? Talking of changes over a period of life, I recommended we watch Excalibur.
That is some excellent segueing.
Yes, yeah.
So this is Brian, as we said a little bit earlier, had seen it from a young age. Kevin, you hadn't seen it?
So it's weird because I knew when anybody says Excalibur and they reference this movie, I know instantly in my head the DVD cover with the kind of the oil painting. It's kind of oil painting-esque or something. It's like, in my memory, and the incredibly shining armor, but realizing it was more of a serious movie than it was, Clash of the Titans, Chasing the Argonauts. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was less mystical than, but in my head, it's like more of a serious representation of Arthur. But then when you watch it, it's probably because I've been to Merlin's castle. I think it's in Cornwall, I believe. But
Tantaginal.
Say again.
Tantaginal. Is that it? My wife will kill me. She's Cornish, so she.
Oh well, it's a beautiful place. I've been there, but it's obviously the most realistic telling of the Arthurian legend.
Yeah, I mean it's the most realistic telling, except it's not realistic at all. I mean, it feels like a sort of drug dream of it's got dreamlike qualities. I think. Really kind of set it
overexposure on the shine on the armor and the green lights, and it's like really trippy.
The first thing I think that strikes me about it is that the audio quality of it. It seems like every single thing is ADR'd, so everyone has re-recorded their speech over the video, and that gives the audio a kind of quite a crisp and distinctly odd quality. Yeah,
Aidan literally texted us when he was watching. He texted us like, you must have had it on for like 2 minutes, but you're like, this whole thing feels like ADR'd,
I think I got 20 minutes in and I went, the whole movie has to have been ADR'd. Even just like, not even like it was a choice, but like they were shooting outside. Everywhere was a forest. Everybody's in armor clanking around the place.
Yeah.
And like, it feels like it just had to have been a necessity. Like no piece of sound they got. There was either horses, mud, wind, howling extras, howling mountains, extras.
But even then, I kind of feel like, I actually feel like it was almost a deliberate choice. I feel like there's a certain audio quality to it that is almost, the audio is almost hallucinogenic. It's like when you have a dream and you hear a real voice coming from outside that dream. It's got elements of that in it. You're kind of, it's like a lucid dream. The whole thing is
fair.
Dream, I think. And I think it's a magnificent film. I don't know if you want to cut to the chase and then we'll talk about it.
No. I think I want to I want to quiz you a little bit more on it because I want to draw it out. I want to quiz you on it a little bit more though, because this is, you suggested this, right? And it's like, is this a film you saw as a very young age? That
I've seen it, I mean, a few times. So I mean, I'm sure the first time I saw it, I mean, we was 10 or 11 years old on a black and white telly up in the top floor, the attic room in our house when I was, very, very young and impressionable and desperately trying to find some filth on TV. And this was kind of the closest thing to it.
Fair.
And I mean, there's odd things I've since discovered, like the girl who is King Arthur's mother, and is kind of in that sort of vaguely rapey scene, is actually John Boormans' daughter.
Vaguely.
Well, yeah. Yes. I mean, it's definitely.
Grain.
I mean, it's unpleasant. There's a lot of unpleasantness about it, I think. But I those are deliberate choices. Those are not. Oh, I'm sorry. That's my father phone in there. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's not a scene that isn't kind of incidental. I mean, I think that's important, that scene, because it kind of sets the idea that I think from the very start it looks like Merlin's been trying to build an idyllic kind of England and an idyllic kind of king, and he thinks he has it in Uther Pendragon, who is King Arthur's father. And that when Uther goes, I must have her, Merlin, I must have her, you've got to help me. That's when Merlin kind of realizes, oh no, you're corrupt and filthy, as bad as everyone else. Fine, I'll do this. But, actually maybe if I do this, what comes from you is going to be something I can work on better. I mean, it's certainly implied, I think, that somehow Uther, I don't know, I mean, it really starts with a battle where Uther is kind of, I think it's King Cornwall, Lord Cornwall or someone. He's fighting this guy in order to control all of England, and this is going to be all the be all and end all. But we don't really see how Merlin meets Uther. We don't find out any of that. There's no backstory to that. It starts kind of from that moment. So you can read into that. I mean, I choose to read into that he's come to Uther late. My feeling is at that scene and that area is basically Merlin going, okay, this is a washout. Let's start from scratch. Yeah. Let's see what it's like if I can raise the child of this to see where it goes. So yeah. I mean, it feels like a deliberate choice. I mean, I'm not honestly not that familiar with the King Arthur myth and legends. I think we all think we sort of are, but we're probably
we know the general gist of it.
Yeah, the general.
I was obsessed. I was obsessed with it, as a kid. Okay. I read so much about it. So that's one of the reasons why I recorded the film. And then I was watching the film, I was like, I'm too young for this. But when I went back years later to actually try read as much of it in detail, because all I'd read was just kind of summaries and annotations of things, and kind of kid-friendly versions and stuff. But I kind of knew a lot of it. But when you go back and try read it as an adult and try read the sources of stuff, it's kind of why the film works. I think it's incoherent. It's the same with it's like with Norse mythology. If you it's okay, well, Loki is his own, is this horse that Odin rides is Loki's daughter. It's this kind of stuff. It just
they're all
kind of get lost.
They're all kind of a mismatch of. I mean, sometimes there's sort of bits of other legends that someone's gone, let's wrap that into Arthur. And, and this gives you a coherent narrative that kind of, it sort of explains everything at the same time. And I mean, the other thing as well is visually it's stunning. I think visually it's stunning, even for the time period. There's obviously no CGI in it. It's all. But it's quite stagey as well. I mean, it feels like it's come from a theatrical background. The Excalibur, notably, I think, is every time you see it, there's got a green sheen on it. So there's obviously a green light.
Well, Stephen, I was watching a scene of it earlier. Again, I was just I was talking to my mother about, we're going to go and talk about Excalibur, and I was showing her clips on YouTube, and we got to the scene where Arthur is knighted in the moat or in the water.
Scene,
yeah.
But I was looking at it going, even the way this is now, he's kneeled, and the knight performing on the knighting, knighting him. Everybody's staged around him. The couple of horses, the other knights, down to a V in the center of the screen, and Merlin dead center of the screen looking at it. It's very purposefully composed, these shots.
I think it's classical in that sense. Yeah. Like
Yeah, I love that saying. I love kind of Merlin's reaction, which is where he's kind of going, "Oh, I didn't see this. This is completely unexpected. This is," and it's kind of delightful. There's a delight in Merlin and everything that he's doing. I mean, Merlin is fantastic in this.
He's superb. Yeah.
So many weird choices that just work.
Yeah, I think they said to the director of this movie that he could absolutely do it as long as he didn't cast that guy as Merlin, but he was just like, "Nah, fuck it, I have to."
Yeah.
Which is kind of a weird one, you know.
Is that a piece of trivia, is it? Or is that...
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I think whatever production company got behind, obviously producers decided to fund the movie. They said to the guy,
would have wanted a name star as Merlin, I would have thought, because Merlin is kind of. I mean, it's a weird sort of narrative because we're following Merlin, then we're following Arthur, then we're following Lancelot a little bit, and then we're kind of following Percival. And it becomes a film in the end.
It is strange, yeah.
Yeah, so you've got kind of multiple leads at multiple points. It suddenly becomes this person's film, then this person's film, then this person. I mean, at one point Merlin is just, I'm going to piss off now. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, no, he just disappears for ages. Yeah. But I think it was Liam Neeson's theatrical debut.
Yes,
and possibly Gabriel Byrne's.
I don't know, but I know definitely Liam Neeson. I don't know.
But that's as good a point as any to go. That cast, like, I didn't look it up. I knew Helen Mirren was in it.
Yeah.
And I'd forgotten Patrick Stewart was in it. And then as I'm watching it, I'm like, that's Gabriel Byrne, and that's Kieran Hines, and that's Liam Neeson, and that's that's Richard from the Keeping Up Appearances.
Yes. He was brilliant.
He was filmed in the south of Ireland. I think he was living down there, so it became a kind of. I mean, it's long before Game of Thrones came to Ireland. That was filmed there already. But I mean, I think it's a stunning film. I do, and it's quite funny in lots of parts, and a lot of it's Merlin just being kind of silly. You know, there's lots of that goes on. There's a great scene where he's trying to catch a little fish, and I kind of go, "Oh, there's always something cleverer," and then he kind of falls into the water. It's got lots in it.
Did you think it was kind of a strange, like, maybe I'm completely wrong, I interpreted it incorrectly, but did you think it was kind of strange how one moment of the movie Arthur almost came across as a pacifist, you know, and then kind of in the latter half he's very different from that. It's like the character development, it's kind of strange. It takes a turn real fast.
Yeah, I think there's what's happening is there's a lurch in time.
Yes, there is.
That maybe that maybe isn't communicated as well as it could be. That there's a sort of here we are. Arthur's a child, effectively. He's a teenager, and then here we are now. Arthur's king, and now here we are. Arthur's been king for 10, 15 years, and it's like there's no sort of. And now we're going to show you a montage of what the kingdom's like for this is what happened over those last 10 years. It's like straight to we're 10 years later, and I mean. Part of that maybe it's because they're sort of trying to hit all the story points of King Arthur's, trying to get as much of the myth and the legend in there as possible. Yeah. And
it's that kind of dream logic as well that it just, it can change on a moment's notice, and it all just makes sense in the context of it. It's we're here now. This happened, and all this other stuff has happened. And
I mean, I buy it. Like I completely buy that Arthur was a good king. And then over the course of whatever amount of time it was that, I wouldn't say he stopped being a good king, but kind of lost focus and lost, this is the myth that they're telling us. Arthur sort of loses focus and then Guinevere heads off. And but I think early doors, there's a moment where King Arthur does that. He breaks the sword when he's fighting Lancelot.
Yeah.
And that's an early view of what will happen later whenever the kind of Lancelot betrays him or Guinevere betrays him, and he looks like he's going to kill them both, and that hatred kind of imbibes the sword, that corruption, but kind of that corruption of him, that corruption of the sword, and that corruption of England are all one and the same, and I think that's an early look at it. That kind of I will be a good man, but you're beating the shit out of me, so I'm going to try to the hell with you. And I think that's just given into temptation is what's happened there.
Is that kind of that chasing that ideal as well? That he's supposed to be this perfect representation of what the kingdom can be, but it's that's the kind of the tragedy and the beauty of the story is like chasing that ideal to a fault is what ultimately brings it brings it down. It's like he's established this law and order, and then Lancelot and Guinevere have kind of broken that, and he's got a. It's like, well, if it's going to be this ideal thing, if I'm going to uphold this ideal, I have to uphold it to a fault, and it is to a fault ultimately, and that's the kind of the tragedy of the legend as well.
Yeah, I mean, to me, an interesting thing I think is that it feels like Merlin's motivation is to create a perfect England, a perfect utopian, Camelot, and it's to get to that. And he gets there, and he goes, "Well, I'm done now. I'm going to sort off here." But things change. Things change.
Yeah, the human element almost, it's like Merlin's some sort of god or demigod, and then leave humans to their own devices, and power corrupts.
Yeah, yeah. And then then of course Arthur's sister kind of gloms onto Merlin and goes, "Go show me some of your magic." And who wouldn't be tempted by Ellen Mirren asking, "Show me some tricks?" And it's an interesting relationship between the two of them, because it's like, why is Merlin bothering with her at all? But you can see he's sort of tempted. You can see there's.
Do you think there's anything to the idea that he knows what he set upon her mother? He knows what he did to that family.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe. I mean, to me, it's maybe as well. It's a kind of Merlin gets off a little on people wanting things from him. And once a king is done, he doesn't need a Merlin anymore. It's only when things are tragic or bad that Merlin's required. Whereas Morgana is kind of, I want things from you.
Morgana was Arthur's sister, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking there. Like, yes, yeah. Like, who fathered her child again?
Arthur. in the John Boorman, Arthur does.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, that was. So I just maybe I watched stuff and I was just like, no, I'm putting that away.
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't know how it plays out in the actual myths and legends, because I know there's a couple of characters have been amalgamated into Morgana, but in the film, obviously, I mean, she does the same trick that Merlin did for Uther, and kind of transforms herself to look like Guinevere. And then she kind of comes in, seduces Arthur, and has a child. That child, by the way, as a young child, is Charlie Boorman, who went on to be on the motorbike show.
Long Way Round.
Way Round. And is the son of John Boorman, the director.
Okay.
He's, as much as possible, trying to cast family and friends.
Absolutely.
He did, yeah. Yeah, because his daughter was the Lady in the Lake.
Yeah, no, his daughter was the Uther's. I
think he had two daughters, maybe, because I'm pretty sure I read. Now again, let's see, someone can fact check that.
I mean, we need. Every show needs a fact checker somewhere.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
working on it.
What we really need is one of those. You remember the Vox Pop, the little pop up things in the music videos.
Yeah.
Here's a true fact.
Yeah,
like that there. Yes. So yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the gist of the bad guy. I mean, the bad guy is of course Arthur's son and his sister. His half sister. Listen, I mean, sister. That would be gross.
Half sister, baby mama.
Yeah. And that suit of armor is great too. That sort of gold suit.
It is
great. So iconic.
Yeah. I mean, when I was watching it again, my first thought was how much of, I don't know if you've seen Raised by Wolves, Ridley Scott's Raised by Wolves.
I think I nearly finished the first series.
Right, okay. Well, when I first saw Raised by Wolves, I thought, this is what's really interesting about this is that Ridley Scott is kind of going, what if sci-fi continued and there wasn't a Star Wars? What if, like, 1930s sci-fi just kept going and there was never a Star Wars to reinvent it? What if that's the sci-fi we ended up with now? And
I loved it visually.
Yeah. But I actually, having watched Excalibur, I kind of come around to thinking, oh, this looks like he's really influenced by Excalibur. There's a dream logic to it, and there's sort of the mithril, the religious aspect to it and stuff. It's got this kind of weird, similar sort of dream logic to it, and I thought that was interesting.
There's a thing, like, I'm going to come back to that immediately, but I was just going to say there's this thing I really liked about Merlin sort of explaining this concept of the dragon. The dragon is in the earth and the stones and the thing.
Yes,
like this idea of a thing that is.
Force.
It's the Force. The dragon is so associated with the Welsh dragon, Britain, and St. George and stuff, and to sort of tie that into that sort of Knights and Dragons thing as this
I'll
concept.
That's all I remember. I'll not rack, and so on.
But what I was going to say on that is, I definitely got Legend, Ridley Scott's Legend as well with Tom Cruise. Like that's another one in this sort of dream logic, ethereal, sort of just trance out kind of vein sort of film where there's so much going on visually. Whether or not you end up loving the narrative that happens in that movie, there's so much.
Too much on plot. They should concentrate on sort of dream essence.
Yeah.
Kind of woo. Don't know what's going on. Who cares? Doesn't matter.
This film is designed to be found at 2 a.m. on a small television.
With a Zardos playing immediately afterwards. That's the that's the other mad John Boorman one.
Is that him as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Just lucky I picked Excalibur and not Zardos.
I'm connecting so many dots here as well because I was talking about. I briefly mentioned to you that like I watched this and went, do you know what I need to watch right after this is The Green Knight because I haven't seen it. And again,
such an obvious kind of.
It goes so directly into it.
So I mean, it feels like it belongs with it. I mean, it feels if there were a sequel to King Arthur, it would be The Green Knight. Which again,
and it even name checks that at the start of the movie where it goes. Much is known of the boy who pulled the sword from the stone, but that is not this story. This is not that king, and then it goes off. But
I did start to watch it a few times. It looks awesome.
Part of Excalibur, actually, which is I'm of the generation that watched the goodies, so I cannot see the font they use at the start of Excalibur without immediately thinking it's the goodies. It's such a 70s font that it immediately. I mean, I don't know what they do now. I don't know if they'd use a kind of Celtic font or whether they'd stick with something very subtle, kind of typewritten or whatever. But you certainly wouldn't get that groovy 70s vibe. If you were
I think that's a great point. Like as this was the first time me seeing Excalibur, so like I really enjoyed it, but I was also like, whoa, they'd make different decisions now, even just trying to like narrative or hold things together. And following into The Green Knight, then we have these mini episodic things where we have time lurches or stuff, as you say, but we get a little bit of text on screen going, an encounter with St. Winifred, a beheading in the Green Chapel. It kind of breaks it up for you a bit.
Actually, you're right. Actually, with King Arthur maybe could have done with something like that. And Excalibur could have done with something just as a kind of chapter break between segments. I think maybe it was a mistake to let it run, but that might have been a decision of the time of the style, like. Even, when I was a kid, I used to watch films that were set in the 1800s, and my brain went, oh, this must have been filmed in the 1800s, because that's when it was set. So, like, films like Excalibur completely threw me. They were like, oh, yeah, this must have been filmed in 1343 or something. I don't know. But you kind of come to it, and you're like, oh, no, it was filmed in the 70s. Now, that explains so many choices and so many things it's doing. I think, actually, the films don't age as much as the trailers do. When you ever watch an old trailer, you watch it and you go, wow, this is not the way trailers are made now. This is
100%. Did you watch the trailer for Excalibur?
No, but it's on the extras. I bought it on Apple's iTunes a few years ago. Actually, I started watching it a few years ago, and I kind of forgot it. And when you were asking about things to watch, I went, Excalibur. I've already started. I've got it. But the trailer is the only extra that it's got. And I've been told I've heard the DVD has a really good John Boorman commentary on it. If you ever pick up the DVD somewhere, so
I have the DVD at home for sure, man. I'm sure, like 100%. My dad has this on DVD.
This is very much a dad film.
That's the other thing. I was talking to a mate about watching this, and he went, "My father loves this film, and every so often he sits me down in front of it and goes, isn't it beautiful?"
Yeah, one of my customers said his dad loves this movie.
He doesn't quite connect, but. It's just got such a beautiful shot, and he's tearing up as he rides out. Like he told me this.
The problem I'm having is I'm of the dad generation now. I was like, oh, I can't believe people's dads, because my dad, I don't think even knows this movie exists. But like, I'm like, oh, this movie's amazing.
Well, one of my dad's favorite movies. It doesn't matter if he's watched it the week before, if he's flicking through channels and it's halfway, if it's close to the end and it's just started. Braveheart. He'll watch Braveheart all the time, every time.
Yeah, it's very much a generational dad thing. That's every generation of dad has their own kind of island, castle-based medieval-esque film that they must want and love for a moment of time. And that your dad's got Braveheart, and I've got Excalibur. So yeah, I mean, there's elements of Lord of the Rings in there as well. Like they're very.
John, what's the director's name? Sorry,
John Boorman.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, they was talking to him doing Lord of the Rings.
He wanted to do Lord of the Rings apparently before this, and they said no. So his alternative was to do Arthur. So a lot of it kind of is his kind of like just sneaking a little bit of like, like if I was to do Lord of the Rings, it would look a little bit like this, Yeah,
I mean. It's that end bit where he's going off on the whole thing of Merlin talking about it's our time has passed, our time of magic is gone, our time has passed. It's all like if that were like if you cut to that in the middle of Lord of the Rings, that would not feel weirdly out of place. It would feel like that's all of a piece. That kind of reminiscent of that sort of magic is going. There's talk as well of there's a new world. There's the one God is here to replace us all, and so on. So it's kind of I mean, do
you have any concept of whether or not they were throwing money at this, or looking at it, it looks like they threw money at it.
I mean it's hard to know because it's sort of you can't really. I can't really tell. Like I say, it's quite stagey and I don't think it's particularly effects heavy. There's a lot of horses there. There's a lot of suits of armor, and those things couldn't have been free. But at the same time,
Camelot looks a bit cardboard in places.
And a big cast. So I honestly don't know. I don't know what the budget was like. I don't know. I mean, I should have done a little bit of research, really.
Well, it's just when you look at John Boorman's directing career, it's like I'm looking at the list, and it's like Deliverance is 72, Zardoz, Exorcist 2, and then Excalibur. And it's like by the time he gets to there and was talking Lord of the Rings, like, did those films lead to the clout that meant they could throw money at this? Like the round table scene where Percival wanders in as a squire, I guess, and sees the extent of it, and he's like, wow, like that's an impressive scene. Like it's a lovely looking table.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't feel there was a lot of money there. I feel there was maybe a lot of opportunism, a lot of kind of, I would guess he found an armorer that probably had some suits of armor. I don't feel like maybe they chucked bucket loads of cash at it.
I have the budget here.
Sorry?
No, go on.
I had the budget here.
Yeah, but will we know what it means in relation to the period?
Yeah, exactly. In terms of like what 1981 standards, it was 11 million. What's the budget? So I'd imagine pretty big.
But what was the? Can you look up the number one film of the time and how much that budget was?
I can do, but I think
wasn't it in 1980?
81 was Empire Strikes Back.
After Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back. So that's a good frame of reference, isn't it? Clash of the Titans was 81 as well.
Was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Budget for Empire was 18 million.
There you go, and you can see that money on screen.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Mm-hmm.
Superman was 81. That was the highest grossing one. Then
Excalibur
Superman 2
had a lot to compete with.
And then 9 to 5. 9 to 5 was number 3 that year.
Oh, there you go. I don't feel like that was necessarily competition for it though.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably not.
It was a good year for movies. No denying that. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, at that age, I would have desperately wanted to see. Well, Clash of the Titans was the film I was waiting on, and I know I was waiting on it because there was 2000 AD at the time. There were little black and white comic strips of Clash of the Titans on the run up to Clash of the Titans coming out. Cool. And I went to see it in the cinema during the summer holiday. It was an amazing film. So that was, I would have loved to have seen Excalibur because I was into the kind of myths and legends stuff, but obviously it wouldn't have, no one's going to let an 11-year-old me go and see Excalibur.
Excalibur was number 12 that year.
Yeah.
Clash of the Titans was number 19.
Uh-huh.
which isn't too bad, but there's another one there I saw that was pretty interesting. American Werewolf in Paris, number 15. That's a great movie. It's one of my
We're
favorites.
off in London, right?
Oh, sorry, American Werewolf in London. Yeah, sorry, Paris is the terrible sequel. I watched the sleepover.
There's
That
no
was
way
awful.
Paris was like 1981.
No, that was 2000.
One that weirdly fluid over COVID that I'd forgotten how long ago that was.
No, sorry, American Werewolf in London, but which is a great movie. That was number.
Yes,
15.
it is. It is.
Well, it did pretty well then, to beat that movie and Clash of the Titans, because Clash of the Titans and American Werewolf in London are pretty iconic,
They are, but I have a feeling Clash of the Titans was maybe not a flop, but maybe didn't do as well as I hoped, because the Clash of the Titans feels like there's a lot of money on screen. And
for sure.
18, to be number 18, and I think it probably isn't, but I feel like that was kind of Harry Harryhausen's last.
It's definitely Harry
Harryhausen's last hurrah is a horrible sentence to say. The last hurrah of Harry Harryhausen. God, what an expression. God. But yeah, I mean, it felt, because I was a huge Harryhausen fan when I was a kid, and so this is part of the reason why I was really looking forward to Clash of the Titans. But after it felt like that was, there was nothing after that from Harryhausen. I don't know, maybe there were some things, but it didn't feel like it. Felt like that was the end of an era.
Well, how long would it take to do this stuff? Easily like 4 or 5 years at the time, and then
there's a lot of animation in it. And little thingy. Stop motion
stuff. Yeah, that's why. And then I remember watching some sort of documentary a couple of years ago talking about kind of the introduction of CGI and all that kind of stuff. And when they were making Jurassic Park, some people were tasked with doing stop motion stuff, and some people were tasked with doing the CGI. And when the stop motion guys saw the CGI stuff, they literally turned to each other. And I think it was Ray Harryhausen, at least his studio, I think it was, but turned around to each other and literally said "Yeah, we're done. This is it."
Yeah. I mean, you can't compete with that. I mean,
I know.
The difficulty is that cheap motion, stop motion looks much nicer than cheap CGI. And, it will always look fake. It will always look weird, and it'll never look right. But at least it looks beautiful. It's got a beauty to it that CGI does. I mean, the thing with Excalibur is there's a couple of bits where it looks like green screen effect or back projection, maybe more likely. But for the most part, and there's a few places where it's like the scene where Merlin gets frozen and under ice. There's elements of that look like, they filmed that on a tiny stage somewhere and just added some stuff in the back. It feels a bit
matte painting stuff.
Yeah. Well, not even matte, almost like a dropped curtain somewhere, just to make the background look a bit bigger. But it feels like anything you could see on a stage in a very small theater somewhere. But it is still kind of pretty and still very beautiful, And the armor is all great, but the only armor I think that is maybe custom made is the one of what's his name? What's the bad guy's name?
Mordred.
Is that Mordred? Yeah, he's Mordred, isn't it? Yeah. He's Morgana. He's Mordred. Yeah. The little shit. It's just horrible from beginning, middle to end.
Well, it's a great it's a great villain armor to have, because it's so it's so indulgent, the gold, and it's beautiful, with the kind of the face and the locks and stuff and the figure. It's such a great suit of armor.
I don't know if it's particular to gold or whether it's particular to just the way they've shot that gold, or because it's obviously not real gold.
Yeah,
but it sort of looks corrupt. It doesn't. The silver has a kind of clean beauty to it.
True, 100%.
Has a sort of kind of corruption to it that is really sort of interesting.
Well, it's even Morgana's idea that he'll be better than his father. So you've got the silver, the gold, the golden child, but there's just something inherently corrupt about him. That shit-eating grin he's got, just coming out under the just that little window into this fucking mauve dickheadery.
Arthur has the. It's either Arthur or his father, but I'm pretty sure Arthur at least has it as well. The armor with the kind of the dog snout, because that's a really cool face mask. That's really, really nice, I
can't remember his facial. I guess the shoulders that get me, the big.
I like that.
Awesome, I do.
Yeah.
And when Lancelot turns up, his armor somehow looks even shinier.
I know, yeah. It looks white, yeah.
Yeah, it's it's beautiful. And I kind of love some of the performances are a bit odd. all of the performances are a bit odd. They're
Yeah,
all a
to be
little
fair. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like Boorman went, right, I know how you performed it when we filmed this, but see during the ADR, right, I want you to go a little bit weirder, smoke some spliff, let's go for this in a strange, some of the accents are a bit kind of, can you do something like Cornish? Nope. Okay, we'll give it a go.
Yeah, try your best. Yeah.
Because the Peregrine, isn't it Peregrine? I don't even know where his accent is. It's like I looked the actor up and he's English, and I thought, I was convinced he was French or something doing an English accent.
Oh, the guy doing Lancelot.
No, not Lancelot.
No,
later on, who gets the Grail?
Percival.
Percival. Yeah.
His accent is kind of weird. It's just very, very strange.
They're all over the place on the movie.
Yeah.
Over the place, yeah.
But it all adds to the charm of, and there's elements of it, I think, not unlike Dracula, Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, which is stagey, and you sort of forgive some of the weird accents because you think, look how beautiful it all looks.
Yeah,
look how, I mean, just
it's all in camera effects.
Yeah. Even I don't want to talk about another film, but like Dracula, Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. There's a great bit where there's eyes just floating over the train as it goes past, and a big book. And the big book was all shot in camera. Apparently, the big book is a big book with train.
It's a big book, yeah.
All
it's an actual prop, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's funny because that's funny as well. You mentioned that because one of the things I said when I put this on was talking to my girlfriend, and I was like, "Oh my god, I can see where Coppola got this armor when they all show up in the silver armor in Camelot, and they're sort of having the sort of, I think it might be the marriage between him and Guinevere, but I was just like, this reminds me straight of like Gary Oldman in that red armor in the church, putting the axe into the altar.
Yes, yeah.
They're so feeding into each other.
Did some.
He designed that armor, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Mignola did the comic adaptation, but I think he also contributed to design elements of it.
Definitely did, yeah.
They may well have done storyboarding and stuff. I have to look for it. My iPad's running. It's at 10% now.
Oh.
A tar thing for it.
no.
I don't know how long your podcast normally goes for.
No, we're doing all right, I think.
Okay.
We're not going to keep you forever. Generally, we record about 2 hours, but you tell us when you've had enough of us,
No, I can keep talking for a long time.
I do have some questions, though, not relating to Excalibur, more to comic books and stuff. Okay. You did Soul Plumber.
Yes.
Did you work close with the guys at all on the Lost podcast? Did you have much interaction with them? What was that like?
They well, first of all, I wasn't supposed to be working on Soul Plumber. I came in because John McCrae wasn't very well, and John and I know each other really, really well. We go back to when I was about 18.
I've a couple of his books as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and John and I had done some stuff together where I'd kind of come in and done some penciling for him, some loose penciling, and he'd inked over it, and it looked really nice. I mean, the interesting thing about John inking my stuff is that when he sends me the ink pages, I look at it and go, wow, it's like I don't even know what I did on this page.
Yeah.
And then when I look at my pages, like, oh no, I can see. Oh, but no, John, it's like an optical illusion.
Yes, yeah, message your head a bit. Yeah.
I'm there, I'm not.
Because it's hard to see the difference, but there is a difference. There is a difference,
Look, I mean, immediately.
But
the pages which I have inked compared to the pages John has inked, I can tell immediately. There's no, they're so different. It's like they're screaming different names at me, so I can tell immediately. But the pages where I've penciled and John's inked, and I'm looking at them, I can't see me at all. It's like John's completely sort of overwritten. I mean, which is great. I mean, it's beautiful and it's what you want. But John wasn't very well, and I kind of came in and he asked if I could help with pencil and stuff. I went, yeah, okay, I can do that. And so I penciled a couple of pages in the first episode, and then did a little bit more. And eventually, I was doing all of the layouts for it, all essentially rough pencils, and it wasn't an awful lot of interaction. There's a little cameo of them in it, and I kind of went, "Oh, this would be fun if I put a cameo of you guys in this." And that was it. So I kind of added to him. I mean, generally, this is the thing about working with film guys. Is film guys kind of go, "Oh, let's have a meeting about this," and you're like, "Well, I don't want to have a meeting. Just send me." If you send me
that's not how I work.
I'll draw what's on the script, and you'll get it back, and you'll go, "Oh, this is great." If we have a meeting, we'll have a meeting about it, and then we'll have another meeting and another, and then it'll be like, I have no interest in drawing this.
Man, you had to get out of tech altogether, didn't you? That's my day job as well, and I had 10 meetings today, and at the end of it, my boss was like, "Are you stressed?" I'm like, "I've done nothing tangible today."
Yeah, Yeah, look, I mean, leave me alone for 2 hours and you'll get all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Get me into a meeting and I don't know where it's going to end.
Yeah.
So those guys were great. I mean, I just got scripts. I mean, I think they were doing a tour at the same time, and the scripts were kind of frequently just dialogue. They were like, there was very minimal kind of description and stuff, which is what I like.
Yeah,
so
fair. Yeah.
because of the nature. Well, because of the nature of the story as well. It was like, oh, does it matter where the placement of this object is in relation to that? And it's like, no, it doesn't. None of that stuff matters. It's just as long as you can tell these jokes and land these gags, then you're golden. So I didn't have an awful lot of interaction with them, but they liked the work, and I think they were probably surprised. Like, and they wanted John to do this, and John just couldn't do it. And I think I was able to kind of bring it back into deadline, sometimes these things get out of deadline, and sometimes they're nobody's fault they get out of deadline. Sometimes they get well out of deadline. This was in danger of getting well out of deadline because the combination of John not being well and those guys being on tour, so the scripts were arriving quite late. I was kind of able to come in and go, no, here we go, wrangle the deadline back to form with late running scripts and stuff. And so, I mean, the only reason that book ran monthly is because I was drawing it. Well, because I was picking up all the slack and going, here we go. And so the editors loved me and they were happy. So that was great. It did me no harm for my career in terms of working with DC. But I mean, if I'm honest, I would have liked John to have drawn all of it. I would have, I'm happier with it. The pages I love are the ones where I've penciled and John's done inks, because he doesn't just do inks, he finishes the pages. So they look like John's, and I know I've contributed. That's my favorite.
Okay, well, that's fair. Yeah. So I will answer all questions. If you give me 2 seconds, I can get a charger. So I
100%. Yeah.
I watched. I know, we're just shooting the breeze, but I watched that Love Life with Anna Kendricks. What's her name?
Anna Kendrick.
Yeah.
What do you call her? The weasel, the shrew? What do you call her?
No,
I call her this adorable lady that I'm quite a fan of, but you're like, she's a monster.
No, I like her.
Hello.
Okay.
I think she's a good actor.
Hey.
I've relocated.
Back. Oh, very nice. The lighting is even more flattering.
Is it? Oh, that's so.
Yes. So okay. So that's cool to hear about Soul Plumber. That kind of like, you were on that book and what you did on it. Yeah, interesting. I really like it. I like the podcast, and I think the book's great and the artwork is awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. The collection's out in October.
Yeah, I'll definitely pick it up. Yeah.
If you haven't, I annoyingly, I'll be in New York for the New York Comic Con. It comes out a week afterwards.
Oh, no way. Well, bring some single issues with you.
Well, no.
Floppies, as I like to call them, but Aidan hates me for that.
I'm just heading over there. I have another book out at the time that will be The Lion and the Eagle, which I did with Garth Ennis. That was coming out. Here's the thing: I was drawing The Lion and the Eagle, and I had drawn, it's 170 pages, war stuff, and around the middle of issue 2, John had asked me could I help him out with Soul Plumber. So I ended up drawing the 6 issues of Soul Plumber while I was drawing the last 2 issues of The Lion and the Eagle. So at one point I was drawing like 40 pages a month or something. It was insane kind of rate. It was amazing money.
I have all of it here. It's very, very good.
There you go. Right,
really, really good. Yeah. I've all of Soul Plumber and all of this. Very, very good.
Well, the collection of that will be out at New York Comic Con, so I'll be signing it over there. So
okay, awesome.
So.
And I was working through string bags on the.
Oh, you guys are on top of it.
Yeah. Well, I've had this stuff already, to be fair, but I actually we'll try and plug you some more, because why not?
Well, that's it. Kevin told me a little while ago that he was putting in a pitch for some comic book funding, and the first thing I said is, if you're going to do some comic books, head over to Amazon, and PJ has, Kevin, if you want to.
Some really awesome, helpful comic book project diary stuff. So stuff you can do your layouts on, and stuff you can do your thumbnails and your dialogue and everything. It's really great stuff.
Thank you for bringing those up. There are a couple that I've got on. They're thumbnail books, which essentially are just pre-laid out thumbnails.
Yeah, but that's actually be interesting. I was going to say that is interesting. Exactly, that is interesting. That is something kind of fun that someone like I dabble. I like to do a little bit of it, and it's just like that is actually just like a fun kind of pre-made structure, not sloppy. You can just dot into it and it's nice. You know?
The other thing is, well, there are books like that, not unlike that, but they're full of bam, whiff, pop. You know, they're like, oh, comics, yay, woo, woo, get your kids. And it's like, no, I want mine to look like journals. I want mine to look like adult journals. Thank you very much. The other really thing nice. there's a kind of comics diary for creating comics, which is a kind of, it's my system, which essentially is how I keep track of work I'm doing and how I kind of get work done. So there's a section in it for writing down different projects and how many pages there are. So the way I normally do it is I will essentially draw a little tick box for every page. So I'll do page 1, 2, whatever, and I'll number each page. And the tick box it'll be an X box, not an Xbox video game console, but a box with an X in it. But it'll have a slash for one direction, meaning I've penciled it, and a slash for the other direction, meaning I've inked it. And that way I know if I've penciled, 12 pages and I have to ink 3 more. So the little diary I've got is kind of an accumulation of how I've worked over the past several years. And it allows me to kind of keep a track of, as I get a new project, I'll add it to that list of things I've got to do. And then as I go through the month, I'll kind of look at, it has a calendar in it, but it's an unusual calendar in that it's got boxes numbered 1 to 25, which represents about 25 pages. So I'm not counting calendars from days, how many pages I can do in a month. And I'm kind of looking at it going, well, been given a project that's 12 pages and I've got 15 to do in January, and then February that leaves me another. So I've got a gap there. I can do it, and that allows me to kind of schedule things out and figure out where I am. Because I don't think there's anything like that. I mean, there's lots of how to get things done. Here's your to-do list, and here's your. But like comics is a weird sort of, like my to-do list is essentially draw a comic page, but it's what page number it is and what project it is. So that allows me to kind of keep a track of all those things. And then I use I'm sure you've seen me talk about it a lot, the Pomodoro system, which is
that was going to be my next question. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because
I love a good cult. It's super simple. Pomodoro is the Italian word for tomato. A Pomodoro timer is a little 25-minute timer. So some guy came up with this system essentially where you do one task for 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. And that's it. Like you pick your thing you're going to do and you just do that for 25 minutes. And it can be as simple or complicated as you like. As it happens, that works very well for comics. 25 minutes for me is enough to get a good chunk of a page done. If that's the only thing I'm doing. And my biggest problem, and I think it's a lot of people's problems, is that you think your perception of time changes depending on your mood and temperament. I don't know, humidity in the air. I don't know. But like I will be drawing a page and I will draw a bit of it and it'll be like, oh, this is taking forever. Oh, I need a break. And I'll take a break. I'll come back and it's like, oh, this is still taking forever. And by the time I've done that, I've drawn half a page, a day has passed, and it's like, oh, I was drawn for a really long time there, and I've got next to nothing done. Because what's happened is my perception of time is completely screwy. It's like, not so. Now, using the Pomodoro timer, this really sounds like an infomercial. Using the Pomodoro timer, if you want to subscribe to my Pomodoro timer newsletter, send money. No, if you use the Pomodoro, what happens is, I have a little app on my phone. The app's called Focus Keeper. Focus Keeper is basically a Pomodoro timer for the phone. So I have this little app, and it will run. So the way you're supposed to do Pomodoros is you do little 25 minutes, then a 5-minute, then 25, then 5, then 25, and then a 25-minute gap. So you're doing chunks of 4. So on each Pomodoro is 25 minutes. So they add up to essentially 2 hours. 2 hours worth of work. But I have a little Focus Keeper app that counts down. So I press the start button and I see my timer count down from 25 to 0. And then when it hits 0, it dings and it says you can take a 5-minute break. And what I've noticed is those days when I think I'm working really hard, but nothing seems to be getting done, is I will sit drawing and I'll go, oh, I've done a load there. I think I'll go on Twitter for 5 minutes. I'll just check this timer and I'll look at the Pomodoro timer, expecting it to say, 30 seconds to end of time, and it go, you've done like 2 minutes, you've done nothing, and you're like going, what? Nah, it can't be right. I was like, I'll keep working. So you work away And you look and you glance up at it going, well, that's easily 25 minutes now. You look up and go, no, you've done 3 minutes now. That's, you have not in any way, shape or form hit anything like 25 minutes. And it resets your notion of what time is. It resets your internal clock so that by the time, I mean, for me, and again, I can only speak for me anyway, but I find it really helpful for me to reset how I view my perception of time versus what it's really like when you're working. Because after maybe 2 or 3 of those, I'm back in sync with real time. Like my perception of, in fact, if anything, it flips, because what happens is I'll start drawing and I'll be drawing away and I'll get a load done. I'll be thinking, well, I'm getting a load done here. And then the timer will ding up for 25 minutes and I'll go, oh, I'll keep going. And I'll keep going for a minute or two and I'll have a break and then I'll kind of, and the break then the break seems to take forever because you're sort of wanting to get back to it. So I find that it's a really helpful way to reset myself in terms of, because the biggest problem, like essentially the biggest problem with drawing is you need your backside on a chair and you need to be drawn. That's it. That's the job. Your backside on chair, drawn, that's it. But when your backside's on a chair, your phone's there and the internet's here and this is there and that's there. It's just so easy not to do that, I mean, and I started, like, I often forget, completely forget this about myself. I forget that, like, I've discovered the perfect way for working. I know if I use a Pomodoro, it suits me brilliantly. I can do, like, in a day, I can do, the other day I did like 3 pages of inks or something, which is a fair amount of work, through just sitting with the Pomodoro. And you feel like, and not only 3 pages of work, but it's like 10 o'clock and I can, I'm finished for the day. It's not 1 o'clock in the morning. What I used to do is I would be drawing stuff and it would be like, oh, I need to do a page. And I would draw a page and it would be 1 o'clock in the morning. I think, oh, it's 1 o'clock and I stop now. And then I went, I'll do 2 pages and I'll draw 2 pages. It'd be like, I'll look up and go, oh, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. I finished. How'd that happen? I always seem to finish at 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was because I think I was speeding up or slowing down without realizing it to meet 1 o'clock. It wasn't like that's how fast I was. It was like, I will go a bit faster because it's getting closer. It's 1 o'clock, I'm bed, Whereas now it's like, the amount of work I'm doing is correct in terms of I'm actually, if I say I'm going to work for 25 minutes, I work for 25 minutes. Whereas without the timer, there's a tendency to go, I'm going to do 25 minutes worth of work. And you do maybe 25 minutes over 2 hours, because you're doing other things and you're faffing around. And that time that you're on Twitter and making funny gags is much longer than you think it is. Because your brain's going, this is good fun, keep the happy endorphins going, let's go. Boop, boop, boop. And so you're sort of on there for ages. So anyway, back to the diary. The diary, I've essentially every day on the diary. So there's a weekly entries where you can enter each week. And at the start, there's a little area for scribble notes. And there's also a kind of 4 check boxes for essentially 4 pages. Or if you want to add more and you can do more, brilliant, go for it. But also there's little circles for Pomodoro timers to represent how many timers you've done so that you can kind of keep a track of how much work you've done based against how much time you've spent on that work. And it's a really nice way to see you're doing stuff because it's like you don't keep track of that stuff at all, and everyone kind of goes, oh, how many pages can you do? How fast are you? And it's like, oh, I do a page a day. Everyone's a page a day. It's not a human being on there. Or Brian Bolland thinks he does a page a day. We all think we do a page a day. We don't, we do different amounts per day, depending on the day and whatever. But this is a good way of giving you a real solid track of it, and I know it works for me. And you could make the argument, and it's been made certainly, that I am a fast artist. That's just the nature of me. So I am fast. So I don't need, like it wouldn't necessarily. Not everyone doing exactly the same as me would get that amount of pages done. That's just
and just on that as well, because you put up like, oh, I finished this page or I've inked that number of pages a day, and it does seem fast. But you look at the artwork, like the war stuff you're drawing, the scenes you're dealing with, the mechanics, the number of characters, like you're putting a lot on a page in a day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to not. I don't know how to sit back and go, yeah, that's enough now. I think like I always realized, the thing where you've got to be either good or fast or easy to get on with. Pick any two of those. I've never been able to control how good I am, so I control how fast I am and how easy I am to get on with. And as long as I can keep those under control, I'm all right. But there's a great. It was Pascal who said, because I like to quote people. It was Pascal who said, he wrote a letter to a friend. He said, "Please forgive me for how long this letter is. I didn't have any time to make it shorter." So that's my problem. It's like drawing less lines takes longer. Going Toth takes longer. It is so much faster to do more lines than you should. But also, I'm a demon for kind of figuring out shortcuts. Figuring out how to do something fast. And comics is about. Quite a lot of it is repetitive. So the most obvious, most repetitive element that every comic artist does is draws panel borders. And most of them probably do it without even thinking. They're probably thinking, well, I'll get this page set up and laid out. And they don't think how much time that takes. And that might not take much time, but my experience of it was it's taking 5 to 10 minutes every single page. And if you cock it up, if you want to get it exactly right, and I was quite anal about, I wouldn't use a T-square, so the only way for me to get a page exactly square was to measure it each side. So if I was drawing a panel border, I would be measuring how many millimeters down from the top left-hand edge of the page and how many millimeters across. And then I was making pencil lines, and then I was getting out a mechanical pen that was 1.4 millimeters thickness, and I would shake it, clean it, go and wash it for 5 minutes, come back, that's grand, ink that, and repeat that process for every page. I'd be drawing panel borders, and every mechanical pen, I would need to, if you did a batch of pencils, 5 or 10 pages of pencils, you'd have to rewash your mechanical pen. And that's a long, it doesn't sound like much, but it adds up. It adds up over a 20-year career. 5 minutes every day adds up to real time. And it's not just that. There's a book by, I can't remember the name of it. I can't remember who wrote it, but he was, I think, the British Olympic cycling team coach. And his theory was that every single millisecond you shave off something adds up. So it wasn't just it wasn't train your person to be the fastest by making them cycle harder and that's it. There wasn't one big thing. There wasn't if you eat all the nutrients, you'll be the best cyclist in the world. It was if that helmet is 1 millimeter thinner, that gives you 1 gram less weight. That makes you 0.001 second faster. Now, if your shoes are 0.4, thinner, then that makes them slightly faster. Now, if you keep your arms down like this instead of up like that, and all of these things just add up and they just accumulate. And they accumulated so much. I think they were constantly winning. That's why English cycling is so big, because they were constantly winning for a long time. And it was because of this kind of just constant sort of small little things. And so for me, it's like all these things. So now, for example, for panel borders, which would have been a 5-10 minute job, even though I'm all digital now, even before I was all digital, what I used to do was I would pencil a page. I'd mark out the squares of the page. I wouldn't give a toot about where the panel borders were. I would just sort of roughly draw them. It wouldn't bother me if they were wonky or whatever. I'd just roughly put them in. I'd pencil the figures. I'd scan that into the computer. I would take that into Clip Studio, and Clip Studio has some amazing tools for things like doing panel borders. Doing panel borders in Clip Studio is press one button to say create a panel border. It does a big panel border, and you say, I'm going to put a border there, border there, border there, border there. And it's as fast as that. I'm not exaggerating. It's literally what I've just done there is how fast it takes. And that, as opposed to 10 minutes or 20 minutes, it could be, because you might have made a mistake, or you might have erased something, or you might have squashed a bit of ink across the page while you were rubbing something out, and you've got to fix that up and stuff. So I was doing that. That's one of the first things I was doing, and that made that process faster. And the other thing I was doing, if I had a pencil page, I would scan it into the computer, I would print it on the reverse side of that paper in blue, and I would ink the blue, and that meant I never had to rub anything out. And that, it seems stupid, but every artist that inks their own work is rubbing that work out. And that's 10, 15, 20 minutes of just doing this. No skill in that. That is literally just rubbing things out. And Jack Kirby famously said, like, every time I rub something out, it costs me money. So it's like, it is. I mean, that's why Jack Kirby was so fast. It wasn't so much that he didn't make mistakes. The mistakes didn't matter. You would just keep going. You make a mistake, you keep going. I mean, I'm the same now. Like, when I was traditionally penciling, if I drew a head wrong, like if it was the wrong scale or wrong size, slightly too big or slightly too small, instead of rubbing that out and redrawing what is otherwise a perfect head, I'd scan it in and shrink it down. If I drew someone in such a way that their head was being cut off by the top of the page, I wouldn't worry about it. I would scan it in and just add the rest of that digitally, or I'd move things around. Or if I'd drawn a panel and it's like, oh, that's a really nice panel, it's just not enough room for dialogue. Once I scanned it in, I would literally just squeeze it down a bit so there's more room for dialogue. So it's kind of computerization allowed me to be faster anyway, but also a kind of unrelenting, how do I make this a bit quicker? How do I speed up this process? How do I, just take the little 2 minutes, take this 2 minute job and turn it into a 2 second job? And that sort of, all of those things add up. I mean, also, I'm brilliant. I'm fast. I mean,
at what point did you get into Clip Studio or the digital stuff? Like when you were working and drawing initially, was traditional? At what point did the scanning come?
The very first bit of software I ever drew digital artwork on, I wrote on the CPC 464 when I was 14 years old. And it was, now I don't want to make myself sound amazingly smart, but it was because I wasn't. I mean, I was typing in a computer program from a magazine, but it was 3 or 4 different computer programs that I'd merged together into one big computer, because one had a flood fill and another one could draw circles perfectly and another one could draw elasticated lines, which was a big deal at the time. I used to use XOR. Anyway, so I wrote my own software. I mean, software is a big word for what was a computer program, but but
when you say that you combined you had the two paths of computers and art from the very beginning, I programmed my drawing.
Yeah,
amazing.
I mean, I went to my careers advisor when I was 14, and he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I love computers and I love drawing. What can I do that brings it? What can I do to do them both together?" And he went, "Oh, you could do technical drawing." Mm-hmm. Which is drawing camshafts and things like measuring stuff. I had no idea, but so there was no creative outlets like that. But the very first, I think I was doing stuff on Manga Studio version 2 or 3 or something. It was like I having worked in computers, I know there's no version of software worth looking at until it gets to version 3. So I just avoided anything from 1 to 2, straight on to 3.
You seem like a child prodigy in terms of the whole computer and stuff. Did you know Walter O'Brien? You obviously were. Did you ever hear of Walter O'Brien?
That name's familiar.
The Irish guy who was a child and hacked NASA, and he's a complete.
No, I mean, I wasn't. I was only a child prodigy in the sense that in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man was king. That was as far as it went. I mean,
Walter, I think, might be a con artist, but.
Well, I mean, there were definitely. I mean, I was not. I mean, as much as I enjoyed the film War Games, and I wanted to be that kind of guy, that wasn't who I was really. But I did like computers and I did know how to program them. So in that sense, you were like, oh, that's slightly more godlike than. I mean, when you're younger and you draw stuff, people are still in awe of that drawing, but nobody thinks I'll pay you to do something with that. It's just. But the very first computer drawing I think was probably I remember doing animation in Autodesk Animator, and I think probably 97 or something. It might have been earlier than that. I was digitally lettering in about 96 or 97. You couldn't get fonts in those days. There was only one decent looking font. I think it was called Whizbang, and I used to. Because computers, I mean, I'd access to scanners, but it was very hard to get anything bigger than you could very cheaply get 4-inch scanners, 4-inch wide scanners. But A4 scanners were outrageously expensive. They were the domain of desktop publishing. Desktop publishing sounds like, oh, everyone can do that. No, I mean publishers. They were the domain of publishers. But I did have access to Corel Draw, which was an art program at the time, and I used to what I would do is I'd do my dialogue on the computer and I'd print it out and then cut it out and stick it down on paper. So it was kind of hybrid sort of working. But like the very first in anger digital drawing I did was probably there's some parts of a book I did with Garth called Happy Valley, which was 2009, I think, which are all not all digital, but a digital drawing. I was using digital stuff before that, sometimes to touch things up after they'd been, to be like, let's correct a wee bit of that, let's make that a wee bit, let's take a bit of white out to that, digital white out. But that was the first time I remember getting a friend of mine, Jim Lavery, lovely fella, had bought himself this antique 12-inch, and I kind of went, can I have a go? Because I want to see what it's like. So I had, and they were expensive. They were like £1,000 or something for a 12-inch screen, tiny little screen. And I tried it, and I was looking at stuff I'd done digitally, and I was looking at stuff I had done traditionally. It was like, can you see the difference? Because there was still, at that point, there was the debate that computer drawn is going to look like computer drawn. It's always going to look like computer drawn, because the only computer drawn, I think people didn't know how to delineate the methods that were being used. It was just everything. It was either computer drawn or not computer drawn. It was either CGI or not. And so, CGI and computer drawn and digital drawn all meant the same thing, even though they weren't really. So there were some early they were called computer generated comics, but I think they were actually a mixture of 3D applications and a mixture of hand-drawn.
There was
a digital Batman, and there might have been a War Machine. There was definitely a Batman.
Remember this 3D Spider-Man comic?
Sorry?
I remember a 3D Spider-Man comic as well. Very 3D.
Oh, I don't remember that.
But the War Machine thing was like, because it was it was basically posing CG models. It was like, we can get these out every week, and it's like, yeah.
Nope.
You can.
No. There was. I think there was a Milo Manara Batman comic that was kind of the big selling point of it was it's all set in the virtual reality, and so it was actually done in painted in the computer somehow. I don't know if he was using like a very early Photoshop and using CGI as well. But there was it was quite, I wouldn't say ugly, but it was very much like, all right, okay, they're making a feature of what they're doing here. So I think that's what everyone had in mind. Whereas what I was trying to get to, I think what a lot of people were trying to get to was, can I draw by hand on a computer that it doesn't make it, that you can't tell whether it's by hand or on computer.
Cintiqs were kind of a game changer for that, though, right?
Yeah,
they were getting into the tablets as well.
Yeah, they were. Although, I mean, even now, there's still, like, I've done digital stuff now. For the past few years, I've been nothing but digital. But like some of the earlier stuff I've done, you can see sometimes one page and another page, even though they're set in the same place and they're done, both by me. You can tell, I don't know why, maybe I'd zoomed in too much on it, and the other one wasn't so zoomed in, that they don't quite match. And I think like the benefit of drawing traditionally is that you don't realize these are benefits because they're happening in real time. But you can only see a certain size scale of paper. You're limited by what your focal length and your glasses are like. Or if like me you have glasses, and the tools that you're using can only do so much. They can't draw down to hair length, hair width lines. They can't do that. That's not the nature of those tools. But they also have a beautiful spontaneity to them. There's accidents will happen, but not just accidents as in big ink splatters. I'm talking about just a little wobble in a line that maybe you didn't expect, or a straight edge. Like if you have a dip pen or a brush and a ruler, you trace a straight line with it. What you get is not a straight line. What you get is a line with a little bounce and a little vibrancy, because every micro vibration of your fingertips is going into that line and into the ruler, and the ruler itself is causing little bumps and micro bumps in the paper. So you're getting kind of life comes from that stuff. Whereas on a computer, you're kind of like, oh, I could zoom right into this guy's eye. I could draw the reflection of this guy's eye, and you can see the reflection on the reflection of that guy's eye as well. And then you print it out. It's like, oh no, I can't see any of that. I don't know
it's a mess, yeah.
Thinking there, but also like the tools I try and now and use like if I'm drawing when I'm drawing digitally, I have a pen set to 0.8, right? That's my fixed width. I mean, it'll vary a little bit. I can lean on it, get a little bit of thickness and stuff, but it's 0.8, 0.8 mil. And what that means is that, like, everyone knows in Photoshop, you increase or decrease the size of your brush. You're constantly increasing and decreasing the size of your brush. The problem with that is that it leads to very fat lines and very thin lines and stuff that looks weird. It doesn't look like it's all together. So the way I would draw, if I need a thicker line, I'll just go over it a couple of times. And if I need a thinner line, I'll try not to lean so heavily on it. And it gives it a consistency that maybe is harder to achieve if you increase and decrease the size of that brush, which is an early, like, I think everyone who gets a Cintiq for the first time, or a device like a Cintiq, will go mad with zooming in and will go mad with changing brush sizes, because those are all tools available to you. But you very quickly learn, I think, that just because you can, maybe you shouldn't. Just calm down and just use the tools as try and limit those things, because they will give you better results. Try and allow the tool to work for you and not you to work for the tool. I do think one of the problems with computers and digital drawing is that it sort of allows an artist to get away with the worst aspects of their personality. Like, I'm quite a sloppy artist. So if I'm not careful, my art can just get mega sloppy. Like, if I want to fill an area, if I kind of I've got to do a close up of this guy's face, I'll just bounce that size way up, so I'll get nice giga thick lines, and suddenly it's a big sloppy head. I was like, oh no, that looks terrible. And I think other artists that are prone to sort of anally detailing every line can get super anal about it, and suddenly what life they had is kind of left, because they're kind of overthinking, over drawing every single thing.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I watched one of your I think one of your tutorial videos on Clip Studio
you really
way back when.
hard when you're doing one of these
Well,
things.
no, I did that again. Like I said, I've been following you for a while, and I like the process stuff, and like I got Clip Studio and playing around with it before the kind of pandemic kicked in, and I landed more in Procreate than Clip Studio, just based on the way the world went for 2 years. But
like I was one of the first users of Procreate, and I wrote articles for an online magazine and stuff for it, because it was a great little tool. It was brilliant, and this is even before the Apple Pencil was available. So or before any kind of Apple Pencil device. And I used to, like, one of the things I would do is I'd do a sketch and I'd take a photo of it and then color that in Procreate, sort of paint over it. It's a really nice way to you get texture from the photograph and actually a bit of color from the photograph as well, and then you kind of build that up with a bit of painting as well. So yeah, Procreate's great, but it is. I mean, it's a great tool, but it's not limited. But it feels like
I see people drawing comics in it, and I'm not quite sure how they're doing it, because like what I liked about, as you say, Clip Studio is that stuff where the panel borders, like, I can't draw outside of them. If I fix that pen size, as you say, I'm not going to mess up my scale and stuff. And like, I run into layer issues on Procreate all the time, but I draw way too big as well. Like, I just set the canvas size, just like, I might need it to be on the back of a bus someday.
Well, I mean, even in Clip Studio, one of the things I've done on my version of Clip Studio is, like, God, I'm so spoiled with Clip Studio. Is quite flexible. Like, you can change anything on it, and you probably saw the other day, I have a bunch of actions that I've added icons to, so I can distinguish each action. So an action is a collection of things that you can program it to do. So instead of having to do the same repetitive 12 things, you program one little button that does all 12 every time you click it, and it lets you change icons. So sometimes I'll sit and make new icons for things. I've got my own little icons. But like, my Clip Studio is so specifically set up for me now that if somebody goes, how do you do a thing in Clip Studio? I have to go away and really think about how I would do it. Like, for example, there's Clip Studio's fill button by default is the letter G, which is the gradient button, which flicks between gradient and fill. In Photoshop, it's gradient. In Clip Studio, it is gradient and fill. You can change the keys. So I changed mine to F for fill, right? That's the first thing I did. But I also added a Z key. And the Z key, what that does is it gives me lines that are either perfectly straight up, perfectly vertical, perfectly horizontal, or perfectly 45 degrees. Now, I honestly think making that on the Z key was genius, because that is a straight line with a 45-degree line on it. It's the only key that looks exactly what you're gonna get. But like honestly, it's so weirdly like I've built this whole library of very specific tool uses and very specific key presses. I have
if you were to try and use the basic version, you'd get a little lost.
I don't know what I'd do. Honestly, don't know what I'd do. But if, like, for example, like one of the tools I use a lot now is I have when I create a document, I have a button set up that says "Get this ready for comics," which basically does a whole bunch of things. One of the things it does is it creates a layer called pencils. And that pencils is set up as a draft layer. Clip Studio lets you indicate either a layer or a folder is a draft, and that means that things like fill will ignore it. So if you do a flood fill, it ignores whatever's in the draft layer. It's almost like that's invisible while the flood tool is being used, which is really great if you're inking stuff because it means you don't kind of accidentally fill or don't fill areas that you would normally do. But and also I've set it so that when you press a button, it goes a light blue. So when you're inking again, if you're inking something, you turn the pencils layer to light blue. All your pencils become light blue, and it's easy for inking. But one of the things I found myself doing a lot was turning off and on that layer because I want to hide it to see what the inks look like on their own. Then I want to show it again to see. And there's no button to do that. There's no way to do that. You've got to go over and click the thing with the mouse. And then I invented a button to do that. So I've got an action, and what the action does is it looks for the pencils layer, and when it finds the pencils layer, it goes right hide, and then it goes back to the previous layer you were working on. So, and I've set that up for the letter H, and then the letter S is show. So when you press the letter S, the pencil layer shows, and when I press the letter H, the pencil layer hides, and that means I can very quickly see what my pencils and inks look like without having to go. And like you can't even do. I mean. Procreate is amazing, and it's a brilliant paint tool. Again, how you would do comics in it. I mean, I know how you do comics in it because I've drawn comics on paper, and it's still more powerful than paper.
You do it carefully.
But, yeah. I mean, like, how do you do your panel borders? So, like, and again, this is this is sort of indication of how anal I am. When I was a kid, well, not a kid, but when I wanted to break into 2000 AD, there was a 2000 AD 10 Commandments, which is essentially, here's 10 things we recommend you do if you want to be an artist for 2000 AD. And one of those commandments, I can't remember which it is, number 4 or something, says, make the gutter, which is the gap between the panels, exactly 5 millimeters. Just pick a weird arbitrary number from the sky, exactly 5 millimeters. But I've kept that for the past 20 years. My gap between gutters is 5 millimeters, exactly 5 millimeters. And now I'll change it and I'll make it bigger and smaller, and sometimes depending on what I'm trying to do. But my gap is exactly 5 mil. And I don't even know how I would do that in Procreate. Like, I don't think there's a way to do that. You'd have to
measurements.
There's not. I've done like recently like 5 pages in Procreate, and one of the hardest parts was literally just eyeing that stuff and making it precise.
Yeah. There's the other thing, like in Clip Studio, I've set zoom steps, so I can zoom in at certain levels. I can't zoom in any more than, I think, 150%, but I tend to zoom in to print size, which is a 1-to-1 relationship between the size I'm drawn and the size it would be printed at. So it's exactly 1-to-1, which is still, like, if you're depending on the screen resolution, you definitely need to zoom in a wee bit more than that. But my next size down zooms in a wee bit more, and that's enough. I don't need to go any further. If you start zooming in any more than that, you get into real trouble because you're inking things that no one's going to see or doesn't even print. So you can lock off in Clip Studio. You can say, that's it. These are the zooms. I'm not zooming any more than this. Whereas Procreate is just like, Procreate's like it's like you're drunk at a party somewhere. It's like, woo, whatever you want, whoa. It's like it's had too many drinks and it's happy to zoom in for you 10,000%, whatever you want to do. It's like, it's up to you, boyo. It's whatever you want. And I like, it's like even finding where the 1-to-1 relationship is quite hard in Procreate. So it's I don't know if I'm drawing the things at the right size. It's really annoying. So yeah, I mean, I use it. I've done it for painting covers. I think I've drawn a couple of covers. Maybe I've drawn a couple of things in it that have turned into covers. Where I've kind of imported a template and then sort of used that to gauge the size of it because I know where the logo is. But like, I don't think I could do comics in it. It's just a little too hard. Like lately I went back and I was on holiday and I did some little comics on paper just for the sake of doing them on paper. Yeah. Kind of surprised to find how fast it is, and B, that no matter how badly drawn they are, they can still work. It's like you kind of think to yourself, I must meet a certain level of quality before I can allow people to read this work. And then you do a couple of silly comic strips that have got a couple of daft jokes in them, and you go, oh no, I actually would read this. So even at this, like, there's nothing wrong with this. It's not terrible. It's not brilliant. It's obviously not as highly polished as my other work, but at the same time, if I did highly polish it, you'd think to yourself, what a waste of time that was.
Did you publish some of them online, did you? Or did you release them online?
I did some holiday comics, which were me on holiday going, here's some silly ideas. And I took them, and I took some other older strips that I have that there's a couple of little 1-page kind of Future Shock like stories I've got, and a 7-page silly anecdote about Sylvester McCoy, meeting Sylvester McCoy, which is all true. And a little 3-page personal story about my mum. And I kind of bundled them up and put them in a wee comic just to see if I could. Because the story, the 3-page strip with my mum is really personal, and everyone that's read it has really connected to it, which is weird because it's like it's so specific to me that you kind of think to yourself, it's essentially it's me talking to my mum who died 20 years ago now, and just kind of going, like, you look at all the stuff you've missed, and I'm really annoyed with you because you weren't here for this stuff, and this stuff was sort of important, and it means something, and what I find is that that's almost a universal feeling. Like, if you've experienced any kind of loss and years have passed, that feeling of, well, they weren't there for the birth of my son, and it's weird as you get older. And my youngest son, so my mum died. My wife and I got married in 2003, and my mum died very shortly afterwards. And then my son, very shortly after that, I said to my wife, I knew we were going to wait a year for kids, but fuck it, where's the harm? Let's go. My mum's gone, and like within the month, there's a couple of months we were pregnant, and so he's exactly, well, not exactly, he's about a year. About a year after my mum died, he was born. And so you kind of, when they're younger, it's like, I wish my mum was here to see this. And then they get older, and you start thinking, was my mum alive then? Did my mum? Geez, yeah. Your brains, the time starts going a bit woozy in your head, so you start forgetting and thinking, do you remember my mum? Was my mum there when Nathan did? It's like, no, my mum wasn't there. My mum didn't know I had kids. Wow. Yeah. So I mean, it felt like that needed a home. That story needed somewhere to go, and I mean, it's a weird home for it. I mean, it's but at the same time, it's like you kind of think, what holds all these things together? Nothing. There's no particular reason any of these stories should be in one book together, and then you realize, no, the reason is because that's how people are. People are, they have stupid ideas, and they have funny ideas, and they have profound thoughts, and they have sadness, and that's what people are. We're a collection of these things, and there's no reason why a story can't encompass all of those things, like Excalibur.
Oh, well done. Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
And that's how you bring it back to this.
That's beautiful, PJ. I think it's fair that we could. I mean, you've given us so much of your time here, and I think it's a fair enough place to start wrapping this up. The journals are available on Amazon. Yeah. What do we search for them?
Just search my name, PJ Holden. You'll either get the journals or books that I've on. So
PJ Holden notebooks. Yeah. The holiday comics. Where can people find the holiday comics?
You can find that on Gumroad. And if you just search for PJ Holden again, but I mean, on my Twitter, you'll see everything on my Twitter anyway, or on my blog, which is www.pauljholden.com. It's all on there. I've got what do you call it, the Lion and the Eagle coming out in October, and also Soul Plumber also coming out in October, but a bit later. And then I think there's a Department K coming out from 2000 AD, which is a collection of stories by Rory McConville and me and some other people, which is a thing I did with 2000. They're a Judge Dredd set world where this department kind of deal with interdimensional problems.
Okay, awesome.
And a funny little thing I co-created with Rory McConville there. It's drawn by Dan Cornwall as well. So and it's coming out October or November or something. I think of something else. Oh, I know what else is coming out. I don't know when it's coming out though. But I did a thing with DC, which is they've done an 80-page giant, which is tied into the Harley Quinn TV show. It's a kind of villains. All the villains get a little spin. All the different bad guys get a little short. So I did a 12-page strip with the Joker and King Shark.
Okay. Epic.
And Dr. Psycho, who's also in the TV show. Not a character I'm overly familiar with, I grant you. But
amazing.
It was fun to do. It was good fun to do. So I'm not sure when that's out, but it's a DC thing. I think it'll probably be out in October, November as well. I mean, this is the curse of my career, is that every time I do work, if I've got like 3 or 4 different projects, they'll all come out in the same week. I don't know why. They just come out the same time. Like in the start of this year, I had Lion and the Eagle coming out while Soul Plumber was on the shelves as well on the same week.
Yeah.
Like that's 60 pages of work. And it's like, part of me kind of thinks, just let this stuff draw itself out over a year and then people will have a chance. I mean, nobody's going into the shop going, the same artist has drawn both those books, I'll buy both of them. Nobody does that. And I also did Time Before Time, which was out in February or something, one issue with
it's a great book as well. With
Declan and Rory again. So loads of stuff coming out, and what am I drawing right now? I'm doing a thing I can't tell you anything about, but I think everyone will like it.
Is it for one of the big two? Is it more indie?
You allowed to even say?
I can't tell you anything about it.
You can't say anything. You can't even say if it's for one of the big two.
No,
I'd say big three nowadays. Image is big.
Yeah, I mean it's.
Say nothing. You're fine.
Say nothing.
I won't do anything.
I
won't press you.
I'm enjoying it. It's not a thing I've done before for a publisher that has not done comics before. But it is it will be a graphic novel, and I'm looking forward to seeing it come out. And I'm doing Chimsky. I don't know if you're familiar with the character Noam Chomsky for 2000 AD. He's a super intelligent ape who is one of the few characters in Mega City 1 that always seems to get the better of the judges, but is equally a good guy, a decent guy. He's not a villain. He's essentially always trying to help other people. So I'm doing a Noam Chomsky strip with Kenneth Diamond.
Epic.
That's great. And yeah, I've seen some of the images going up as well, just up on Twitter.
Yeah, I post more than I should. That's for sure. And you know me, I'll happily tell the world everything. I don't care.
And I'll happily tell everybody listening this to go and give PJ Holden a follow on Twitter for.
Oh yeah, look, I am good value on Twitter.
Art and comedy.
You are. I have to say, I did see, we wrap it up, but I did see a live tweeting about watching the Iger sanction. We've talked about this in the podcast, and Brian was, I was talking about it, then Brian goes like, Kev, I'm not sure if you remember that movie correctly or whatever, it's pretty fucking wild. And then we end up talking about it and looking at it, but yeah, it's crazy.
Oh, it's not a good film.
No, shocking. It flips.
I mean, a lot of people kind of went, oh, you should see the climate scenes. I'm going, well, do you know what? If I'm honest, I'm not getting over the very rapey early scene with the kind of Indiana Jones-esque, but like more rapey, where he's kind of like 60-year-old Clint Eastwood's in front of a bunch of 18-year-old girls, and they're going, woohoo! And instead of blinking, I love you, and which is still a bit creepy. I mean, she's doing a Sharon Stone crossing her legs thing, and then kind of coming in afterwards and going, hey, and he slaps her arse as she leaves. It's like, oh no, that's unpleasant. And then later on, the flight attendant kind of comes up to him, and the kind of the black flight attendant comes up to him and starts flirting with him in a weird way. And then he goes, "What's your name?" And she goes, "Jemima." And he goes, "Oh, if you're Jemima, I'm Uncle Ben." And you're like, oh my God, Jesus Christ, this is. It's
rogue. It's rogue.
And it was worse. I was watching it on subtitles for a bit because I thought some of the dialogue was at least funny. I thought some of this dialogue's quite funny. And they made a big play about the albino spy master. It's like, this feels very not nice. And there's a bit where Clint dons a delivery cap to go and deliver some dental floss. He's his disguise is a dental cap that doesn't quite fit, a delivery cap that doesn't quite fit. And he goes to the door. He says, "Hello, is Mr. Thingy there?" And it's I swear to God, the subtitle says "camp voice," and then his dialogue.
Oh yes, yeah.
Oh,
I saw you post on Twitter, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was. At this point, I was like, "Oh, I'm not connecting to this film at all. This is just horrible." Is it me? I mean, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just being overly sensitive. Maybe I'm too much new agey. Maybe I'm too wokey. I don't know, but this feels not right. And
I feel like that was problematic then. Never mind now. You know?
Oh, look, I am sure. And then later on, he gets the girl back to his house. And she goes, "Oh, you know, what sorts of things do you do?" And he goes, "Oh, you know, I've given up all sorts of things, but there is one thing I'm thinking of not giving up." And I apologize for what I'm going to say next, but this is genuinely a line of dialogue, and I actually don't think I should even say it, though, if I'm honest.
Maybe not. Hold off.
Yeah. I think we mentioned it before, actually.
It is deeply unpleasant.
We mentioned it before because there's a clip on YouTube, and it's just called Iger Sanction Insanity, and we've definitely mentioned it before, and it like we even I think Aidan hadn't seen it, and we said, "Look, take 2 minutes. We'll pause this. Take 2 minutes. Come back." And Aidan came back and was shocked. Like, it's a shocking line. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not. It's the line is terrible, right? The line is awful. It's
Yep.
incredibly offensive. It's it's making a joke of rape, and it's awfully offensive. But then what the director and the writer have chosen to do is have the girl laugh and go, "Oh, you're so funny," and then kisses him, and it's like, "Oh, that is just wildly horrible." And that's when I switched it off. I just went, "This was 10." I don't know, it was 10 or 15 minutes into it. I went, "Nope, not doing it." And I thought maybe this is just the age of that film, but I love the what's it called, the Ipcris Files, which is from 1952, and it's got nothing like that.
You see, I confused those ones when I was talking to the lads, because I knew there was one I liked when I was younger, and it kind of had, Iger Sanction, Ipcris Files. To someone who's like oblivious to it all, it sounds all espionage to me.
Yeah.
I mean, like, so
not the same at all. Anyway, I apologize for derailing the end of the show window.
No, that was my fault.
No, that was fantastic. Yeah. Just a quick question directed specifically at Brian. Brian, did you watch this week's episode of She-Hulk?
I did.
I haven't seen it.
What did you think?
You know what? I like it more when I just kind of watch it. It's kind of reminds me of Iron Man 3 in that I don't like it as being connected to the other stories, but it works really well as its own kind of standalone comedy. And I think this is kind of the same. I laughed at, despite my exhaustion with all this TV stuff week to week, I did find myself, chuckling at a line here and there. So
I threw that question in at the end because I honestly expected you to go, as you have previously, meh.
I like you wanted it to end there.
Too short.
Yeah. So we can call it a night there. At the end of the edit, we generally find a mic drop kind of moment, and the theme music comes on, and I was kind of expecting him to just go meh, and I'd just drop it in there. I was trying to force an edit.
I haven't seen this week's episode. I'm kind of enjoying it. The problem with a lot of the Marvel stuff, the problem with a lot of the superhero stuff is there is so much of it, and I don't feel the need to rewatch any of it. It is like eating chocolate. It's like, that's enough. I'll have some more. But I never go back.
I will say I did go back, and because my girlfriend hadn't seen any of them. So during COVID, if we were kind of lost, we'd watch one of them, And surprisingly, because say like I would have seen Thor 3 once in a cinema, or say Thor 2 once in a cinema. Surprisingly, going back and rewatch them, I enjoyed them.
Yeah,
good movies,
I'm convinced I'd enjoy all of them if I rewatched them all.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have the novelty of going, "Oh my God, I can't believe they put Ant-Man on a film." I'll not have that novelty ever again. But at the same time, I think they're all probably very good, serviceable movies. But the only comic thing that I've watched where I've kind of thought, I think I would like to watch that again immediately was Sandman.
Yeah.
I've watched where I've kind of gone, this is so good, I think I could watch this again and maybe again. But it crossed into a weird thing where the recent Sandman episode, which is the one about the Dream of a Thousand Cats, where I watched it and I thought to myself, I enjoyed that so much. You can't do it with a film and TV thing. It's when I realized what one of the big differences. I mean, I always knew the big difference because I've told people about this, but it's in the comic. I can sit over a page. I can look at one of the page. I could look at one of the pages for an hour. I could look at one of the pages 10 minutes. I could reread it, but just skip all the dull stuff and get to the good stuff, or I could read it backwards, or Whereas the animation of A Death of a Thousand Cats, I loved it so much I would watch it again, but I want to linger over it, and I can't. I want to linger over areas. I mean, there's stuff that the animation that I thought I didn't spot in the comic. And I posted this on Twitter, so I was talking to someone, oddly, I think he's a film critic or something, but I kind of went, the big thing for me was like, when the cats are talking about the dream, the cat is talking about her dream of what being a cat was like, and we see giant cats walking around and little tiny humans. That's watching that was the first time I realized what we were seeing was saber-toothed tigers and marmosets, or things like them, small mammals. Not
a fictional world where cats dominated humans.
No. It wasn't even a fictional world. It wasn't even, imagine once upon a time we used to dominate humans. It was once upon a time we were fierce apex predators. And what we're humans now, we're tiny little monkey things that used to eat nits off us, and we would toy with and we would kill them. And that's what that element is, but that's not how we saw it. We saw
was that how it was in the comic? Like, because I read it about 20 years ago, and in my mind, that's what it was. I remember, and I could be wrong because, like I said, it was about 20 years ago when I read it. I could have sworn it was like saber-toothed cats and things, and I was surprised in the episode that it's actually just like big domestic cats. And I was like, have they changed that? Because in my mind, it was.
Yeah, it was saber-toothed. Do you know what? Yeah. I haven't read the comic in a long time, but now
I just read it. I read it before. Yeah, I read it before. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, you forgot.
I forgot it. Oh god. I'm pretty sure it was domesticated cats hunting cavemen.
Right.
Okay. Or maybe even people in like modern clothing. But no, I'm pretty sure.
I guess then it was just kind of the same as PJ. I kind of interpreted it then as they were. Yeah.
I think when I read the comic, I took it on face value. That this was a dream that the cats had of a past, that this is what domestic cats imagined a past would have been like. But in the animation was the first time I kind of realized this is a kind of myth building that they've done themselves of what their past was like, but it's based on the reality. And that's when you connect it with humans and how humans have done the same thing, and how the myth of Jesus Christ and becomes a god, and all this stuff is kind of interesting.
But even if like we think of cavemen, we think of the Flintstones, we think of ourselves in loincloths, and domesticated cats would think back in a previous time and they'd see themselves, attacking cavemen. So yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I've not watched that episode yet. I am looking forward to it.
Oh, you should.
I read the books. I was just waiting for my missus because she also likes it. So.
Anyway, sorry. Yes. That's another.
I'm going to hit stop record.
Any derails I can get in before.